So yeah, I'm Kumiko. I'm from a nonprofit organization called Hackergal, and we work with schools across Canada to help students like yourselves learn how to code. So the projects that we're going to be focused on today are about making games. And so I'm going to show you a couple games that we made so you can get an idea of where we're going. And then I'm going to take you to start on your own game from scratch. And then about halfway through, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Jennifer, and she's going to do a little bit more advanced coding. She's a more advanced coder than me. So I'll show you the first game that I have open here. And like Peter said, this is made on Lynx Coding. And it's a pretty simple game. It has 4 different buttons here. It has a main character, and then it has these banana peels. And this dialog box here is kind of like my instructions, so the user or the player knows what to do. So it says, "Hi, I'm Kumi. I forgot my backpack on the sidewalk. Can you help me get it without slipping on the banana peels?" So there's different control buttons here that I've programmed, and the character will ride. And then when they get to the banana peel, what's happening? It is stopping and moving back. So we would use the other control, jump, which takes the character over. Again, hits another banana peel, can't move. So you have to jump. And then the character, Kumi, gets to her backpack, and thanks for the help. You've made it. High five girl or boy or whoever's there. And you can always try again. So this is a very basic 1-level game. You could add different levels to it as well. All of this was built on Lynx, and I'm going to show you behind the scenes after I show you Jennifer's jumping game. So this is what Jennifer is going to be showing you as well after. You'll see it's a similar concept of moving characters across the screen and avoiding different traps or different hurdles, but hers is more advanced, as you'll see when I press start. So the hurdles are jumping towards her. So you have to jump over top of the hurdles there. Just like me, she has a stop button, a jump button. She's added a big jump, which jumps higher. And then she's going to talk more about this, but there's a lives button. So you only have a certain amount of chances. And if you bump into the traps, you will lose your lives.
Kumiko, may I interrupt for just a second, please? I think I led you astray when I asked you to share your screen and click those 2 check boxes.
Okay.
We checked the one that, like the one for audio is good, but the other one has caused poor resolution on the screen.
Okay, so let me.
So if you stop share.
Yeah, no problem.
And then when you start to share again, just deselect that other button.
Perfect. Oh, I bet it. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
You have to see her beautiful.
Oh, yes.
That was better.
Oh, yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'll give you a quick review of what this one looked like just so you can see. So the character, this is the banana peel I was referring to, and you just ride and you jump over top and you jump over top and you help the character get the missing backpack so that they complete that level. And just Jennifer's was here again. I'll press reset just so it goes back into the original position. And then again, she can start. Instead of going backwards when the character hits the boulder, something else is happening with lives. So it's 2 different examples of what can happen with the traps. And we're going to be using something called an OnTouch event handler to be able to show you how those different things can happen. So hopefully you can see the graphics now, but again, the jumping and big jumping and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to give you examples so you know where we're going, but now we're going to rewind a little bit and I'm going to show you how to get started. Because believe it or not, this all started with a blank white screen. I'm going to zoom out a bit so it's easier to see. I know someone was asking about whether to go to all projects or my projects. So if you're signed in, your name should be there in the top right corner. And what I will ask you to do is go down to create a project. So you don't have to go to all or my projects. I think sometimes you started with one that's already, but we're going to start from the beginning. If you're not signed in, that's totally okay. If you want to try it, it just won't be able to save. So that's a different process that we can talk about another time. But for now, you could still play around or you can just watch. And later on, when the screen recording is available, you can try it on your own too. So I'm going to click create a project. Just as a quick reminder, you can easily change the project name here. I'm going to call it game 1, and this is how you save your work. Saving your work is super, super important because we never want to lose your code. So some of you have been here before, some of you are new. I'm going to quickly just remind you that there's a bunch of tools on the left, and I'm going to highlight the ones that we'll be using today. This is the save button, which you already saw me use. This is the plus button, and there's lots of different fun tools that we're going to be using today. But when I refer to plus button, I'm going to be clicking here. And then above and beyond that, there will be this button that takes you to the procedures pane. It's a little keyboard with hands on it, and the picture of the house will take you to the clip art images. So those are the 4 tools that I'm going to be using the most today. So keep in mind when I talk about those, that's where I'm going. So those games that me and Jennifer built actually used to look the exact same as this project. Just a white background, or a white work area, I should call it. And then the turtle in the beginning is black, and it should be in the center. So the first thing that we're going to do is drag our turtle, just so you can see whenever you touch it with your cursor, you can move it around wherever you like. I'm going to move it to kind of near the bottom, because a little hint is this is going to later on become our trap. Now that that game had some different players. So the next thing you're going to do is add another turtle. So now we have 2 turtles, and this turtle is going to be my special main character, or my player 1. So to make sure I remember which is this player, I'm going to call it, or going to change the color of it. So I'm going to use set color. That's the first command I'm using in the command center. The command center is the bottom bar of the Lynx text editor. So I'm going to set color, and you use a little apostrophe, and I'm going to do blue. Did I do that correct? Yes. Okay, so now you should be able to see that this turtle is blue and this turtle is black. Let me know or speak up if it's hard to see. The next thing that we're going to do is the turtle needs to be facing the right direction if it is going to have a collision or a touch with the other trap turtle. So what I'm going to do is use our set heading command, and I'm going to change it to 90 degrees, and I think about degrees on a compass. So now my turtle is on track to touch this turtle. So I'll just line them up there. Okay, perfect. So the next thing that we need to do is get this turtle to move, because that's how we create an event, is when they touch, that's how we're going to create that event. I'm going to save because I see this little red dot giving me a hint to save. And then I'm going to go to the procedures pane. There's a couple different ways that you can create procedures, but the most important is that they always start, which I call my procedures hamburger. The top of the hamburger bun has 2, and the bottom has end, and then we're going to fill in the ingredients. This procedure is to get this turtle to move into the other turtle. So I am going to call this procedure to move. I'm going to put in here what all the ingredients are for my procedure hamburger. The first ingredient is the forever command. That means, just like you saw in our stories, that the turtle will move forever until we stop it. I'm going to do forever, and then I'm going to do forward, which makes the turtle go forward. Let's say 20. Wait is like a pause. It will slow down the speed at which the turtle is moving so that we can see it go across the screen at a pace that is easier for our eyes. So now I have my first procedure. Procedures are where the real coding happens. The command center is like a testing zone. It's a play area. It's very important. And then the procedure is where we get to save our code each time we work on it. And I'm sure a lot of you, like Joshua, already know that. But for you newbies, that's the difference between the procedures pane and the command center. So I know this is a procedure because it starts with 2 and it ends with N. Now what I need to do is create a button to make that procedure happen. So as you saw in mine over here, there was a ride button. In Jennifer's, she had a start button. So I'm going to choose my own button. So I'm going to go to that plus button on the left side, and I'm going to click button. your button will automatically pop into the middle of the page and it would look the same as mine. It always starts by saying nothing. So you can drag the corner to make it bigger or smaller. Just like any turtle, you can move it around to where you want. And most importantly, when you right click, you get a dialog box. This is where a lot of the magic happens behind the scenes. I'm going to delete the title nothing because that means nothing. And I'm going to put, you can see some of my ideas from before, I'll do start. And here on click, I'm going to do move, because when I click this button, I want it to move. I want it to use my move procedure. And I'm going to click apply. So what I have done is program this button, name this button, and attach it to this procedure. It's really important to think about how this connects with this, which connects with this. They're all BFFs. So I'm going to test out my button. This part always makes me a little bit nervous on webinars because I want to see if it works. So I'm going to press start, and what should happen is this blue turtle should go across to the next turtle. Yippee. So it goes. And it will keep going forever because I've used the forever command. And you can see what forever means by hovering over it. You can hover over any green word if you're wondering what it means. If this is your first time, it's a good tip to be more independent as a coder.
I can't change the color of my turtle.
You can't change the color of your turtle? One thing I would guess might be happening is that this little apostrophe is very important in the space. So type it into the chat room and Peter and Michael will try and help you figure it out, but that would be my guess. And if it's not the most important part, so if the color doesn't change, that's okay for now. I'm going to stop using the stop button here, and you'll see that will freeze everything happening on my screen. But you know what? We want to program buttons to do that for us because we're real coders. So what I'm going to do is add a button that will stop my turtle. This is going to be probably the easiest procedure you've ever made. And I'm going to show you the second way to make procedures. If you don't want to do it here first, or you're not exactly sure how that works, you're a little bit confused about the procedure hamburger, you can add your button using the plus button here. And then you can right click, just like I did before, to open the dialog box. Instead of nothing, this procedure is going to stop. So what I'm going to do is on click new, because we don't want it to move. I don't want to use my old procedure because this button is meant to stop everything happening. So I'll click new and I will click apply. You can see the name changed, and in the procedures pane, a new hamburger is created. This is important here. This little semicolon and this gray text is not gibberish. It's actually something called a comment, and it's something that coders use all the time to remember what they're doing, and so you can share your code and build on it. Because as you can imagine, when you have lines and pages of code, it's sometimes hard to remember everything that you have written there. So I'm just going to write a short little comment by leaving the apostrophe, or sorry, the semicolon there. I'm going to say this button stops movement. Okay. And then I'm going to do an enter. I'm not going to use that semicolon because now I'd like to put in my command. And my command, as promised, is the easiest one you'll use. It's called stop all. So we have, when I click button 2, and just so you know, you can see on the dialog box, this is button 2. This button stops the movement. That's a comment for my own memory. And then stop all will stop everything happening and ends. So now we have 2 buttons, and I'm going to debug them. I always like to debug and test as I go to see if I have to debug, I should say. I always like to test to see if debugging is necessary before it gets too complicated. So I'm going to press start, I'm going to press stop, and I'm going to press start, I'm going to press stop. Things are working smoothly. So next step is we always want to be able to bring, instead of always dragging it, I want to set my have a reset button so that my character can always go back to the beginning. You can see Jennifer's button here was reset, and no matter where that character went, it would bring her back to the beginning. And I think mine was restart. So even if the character rode anywhere, if I press restart, it brings her back to the beginning. So we're going to add a button this way here. Again, always starts with nothing. I like to make it big so you can see. And I'm going to call this one restart. Again, we're using the on-click event handler because we are going to click the button to make something happen. This is a new procedure. And then we click apply. Let me know if there's any feedback or if I'm going too fast. So this is our third button. If I right click, I can see button 3, which shows me I am working in the right place. Again, I could add a short little comment. This restarts the game, so I remember. And what I'm going to do is now put my instructions here. Now this button is a little bit trickier because we want this button to bring the turtle right to the beginning. We don't want it to bring it up here. We don't want it to bring it down here. This is where my turtle begins the game. So how do I figure out where that turtle is? How do I figure out the coordinates? There's a really cool couple commands here called show pose. And what pose stands for is position. So I'm asking the computer to show me the position of this turtle. So I type it into my command center because it doesn't need to be a procedure yet. And then it magically reveals the exact position of that turtle. That's telling me the coordinates of where it is on the X and Y axis so that I can know exactly where to put this turtle. So my button 3 click is going to set pose. That means I'm setting the position. When I click this button, I'm telling this turtle, can you please go back to the beginning? The easiest trick is to copy and paste those position coordinates from your command center and put them into your procedures pane. Now, you noticed probably in my first procedure, I had these square brackets. The square brackets are really important because they're telling the computer that both of these inputs are really important. They're saying, you know, don't forget about the beginning and don't forget this is the end. Okay, so let's just test this out by putting this turtle into the sky, and then I'm going to press restart, and it takes my turtle right back to that beginning position. So now we have a start. We'll make these look. We have a stop, which I've just tested unintentionally, and then we have a restart. These are 3 really important and really foundational commands into your game programming. What do I want to do next? The OnTouch that I've promised. That's the last thing I'll show you here. So we're going to make sure instead of running right through this trap, because then it's not really a trap, it's just like a little nothing, we want to make sure that this turtle has an event. So we're going to right click, and instead of on click, we're going to use OnTouch, and we're going to click new. So again, I've gone to T1, which is my black turtle, and I've clicked OnTouch and new and apply. Again, a new procedure outline is popped up in our procedures pane. It has the comment for us. For now, I'm going to delete the comment and I'm going to start my programming. So I need to put in what is happening when this turtle is touched and who it's touched by, because it could be touched by many different characters as I build my game. So the most important is we're going to say if touched turtle. So I'm saying what happens when? What happens when this turtle is touched? So if this touched turtle equals T2, and just so you know, T2 as a reminder is my blue turtle. So I'm saying if this touched turtle touches T2, we're going to ask it to do something. So I'm going to use my square brackets and I'm going to say ask T2. And there we go. And then I'm going to ask it to do something. I'm going to ask it to go back, which is what happened in my case, is that turtle went back. And I'm going to do 30. And then I'm going to close that bracket, and I'm going to close that square bracket again. Square brackets always exist in even numbers. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I'm pretty sure that's how I always check if I have the right number of square brackets. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So everyone that opened has its closing partner, its bookend. Okay. This one, I always get extra nervous if it's going to work. So what should happen here? I have told the computer is if this turtle touches this turtle, then we're going to ask it to move backwards. So let's see if this works. Yay, okay. So now we've programmed this the same way as mine is. You could also program later on, which Jennifer's going to talk about, to lose lives or to, you know, go jump or to do different things. But for now, it's just acting as a barrier or a trap. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is do the jump procedure. I can do that, or Jennifer, I could pass it over to you. What would you prefer? You might be on mute there, but let me know if you want me to continue doing the jump or if you'd like to take it over from here.
If you want to write the jump procedure out so that they can see, then you can hand it over to me after and I'll kind of elaborate on that a bit.
Love it. Okay, perfect. I'm going to do a little bit of a fast forward jump to be conscious of time, but that's a really important part of the game was both of us had the jump so you could avoid the trap, beat the game. So what we're going to do is add a jump button. So I'm going to do plus button. You're starting to see a pattern, I'm sure, in this game. A lot of buttons and procedures. I've typed in jump, and on click, when I click this button, I'm going to have a new procedure. I'm going to click apply. So now I have my jump here. This is my fourth button. I really love buttons because we see buttons all the time when we're using websites, when we're playing games, and I think they're a really important part to become a real programmer. So this button has to jump. The first thing I want to think in my head, and this is something that I got a little bit confused in yesterday when I was with you, Kalia and Laurel, is who is this button talking to? I do not want my trap to jump. I want T2 to jump. I want my blue turtle to jump. So the first command I'm going to use is called TTO. That means talking to. So this turtle I'm talking to is T2. And I'm going to put T2 in there. So that tells me the instructions I'm about to give will be talking to T2, not T1. Then we're going to put in the jump procedure. This is the part where we need to think about the direction that the turtle goes when it jumps over something. So for not really inquiry teaching, just in the fullness of time, but what would happen is this turtle needs to go left. I'll just show you an example in my testing zone, AKA the command center. If I make the turtle go left, you see it starts to change the direction of your head as a bird's eye view to go over top of the turtle here. Okay, so that's your hint, and you would make it go up, and then you'd make it go right a little bit, and right and back down. So just to fast forward, I'm going to type it in here, but Jennifer will explore this a little bit more with you. So it goes left, it goes forward, it goes 100. My wait command is just to pause it a little bit so we can see what's happening. We can see the programming that we've done. RT is short form for right, and FD is short form for forward. 80, right, 1, and then so he's going up, he's gone across, and now I'll make sure that he goes back down to the ground. And you'll see there's a lot of patterning in what I'm writing here because it must go up the same amount that it goes down to make sure that it ends in the same place. And then the final thing is set heading to make sure when my turtle goes along its way after jumping, it's going in the same direction. Okay, so I'm going to restart. And one thing that I will do is use my set heading command that I used earlier to get the direction back into order. I could also add that to my restart button later. And let's test her out. So start, okay, that's still working. Let's try jump, jumped over and continued on her way. And it would keep going over and over again until I press my stop button, and then I can always press restart. One little tip I know I wanted to end with was cloning. If there was 2 of me, I would be cloned. And if there was 2 of Jennifer, she would be cloned. Let's clone our trap, because you saw that both me and Jennifer had 2. I had 2 banana peels and she had 2 boulders. So a little tip is I'm going to clone T1. It's a way of being a smarter coder. Clone T1, and let's see, there should be 2. Oh, that not work. Let's try again. Aha, there we go. And now we have 2. And by cloning this turtle, it's already programmed into the same OnTouch command. So let's do
How do you clone?
Clone. So if you look at the bottom in my command center, I've actually just typed the word clone, C-L-O-N-E space, and then you have to tell the turtle the computer, which turtle you'd like to clone. So you can see at the bottom there. And I'm sure they'll tell you in the chat room too. So if I press start, oopsie, what happened there? The last turtle I clicked was this trap here. So it actually moved this one. That will probably happen to you as you code. It's okay. You can just put it back. And then what I'm going to do is click this blue turtle, and in my start button, I'm going to actually add the same command I just told you about, because I want to talk only to T1. When I press start, at this point, I don't want my traps to move. So I'm going to do it now. Didn't work there. Now I've got this guy going. Let's see, because I did the wrong one. Let me double check his name, T2.
I think it's T2.
You got it. So let's try that again. We'll go to restart. Put this guy here. Restart this one to here. Let's keep our fingers crossed. We're going to start. Seems to be going as planned. Okay. And I'm
Something's wrong with my restart command.
Okay, type it in the chat.
Type it in the chat and we'll fix it.
And then it will go on his way, and these turtles will both behave the same way. I'm going to put it here so you can see a little bit better.
So maybe in your button 3_click, the one that restarts the game, you haven't identified the turtle that needs to be set in the position. So perhaps you want to do the talk to or use the name T2 just to identify that that's what's going to reset.
Exactly. So this button, which was my one that restarts the game, let me read my comment here. This one restarts the game. So what I could do in here, which Jennifer is suggesting, is when I restart, I want to make sure that that's also only talking to T2. So it's a good way of debugging, because that's going to happen. And it happened a lot with me and Kalia and Laurel yesterday, is when we press restart, when different turtles would jump around. But it's just actually giving you information, telling you different ways to program your buttons. So I'm going to stop, start, again, jump, again, the same thing happens, jump, and so on. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to you, Jennifer. You guys have learned here how to program buttons to control your game, how to add different OnTouch events so that when the characters touch, different things happen and they must jump over them. And Jennifer's going to show you a whole bunch of other cool ways to make this game look more exciting. And I will stop sharing now.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I know Kumiko did a very brief introduction to herself, so I will follow suit. I'm a curriculum designer with Hackergal. I also, in my spare time, have been very much in love with technology since I was younger. I started primarily learning graphic design before I learned coding. And then when I was in high school, I took all the computer science courses that I could take in combination with communication technology, which is why when you look at my game, you will probably see that I incorporated images that not only look like myself, but have been edited by me. And it's simply because I have some skills in that area that wouldn't necessarily come from learning Lynx on your own. It's kind of complementary. So I will start by sharing my lovely game that Kumiko had shown you earlier. And just going to extend. Everyone should be able to see that fine, correct? The font's big enough for you?
Yes.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, so the very first thing I really want to point out to you is you'll see that as games get much more developed and much more designed, you're going to start to see that your procedures pane is going to fill out with tons and tons of procedures and sub-procedures. Now, it's not as easy to just jump in and get into this point first. There's a lot of thinking that goes on behind the scenes. For example, the jump feature that you saw Kumiko showing you, to think of those numbers, either you're going to copy the code off of someone else's project or perhaps a tutorial that you've watched, or alternatively, what real coders do is they're actually going to test it out. So in my game, before I set up my lovely dinosaur jumping over these boulders, you'll notice that the two boulders here are different sizes, which means that if my creature is to jump, it may not necessarily jump the full amount over this boulder here if I'm not necessarily programming it to jump in the right direction and for the right amount of time. So you should see now in my game, what I've done is I've set up kind of a testing ground where I'm going to be able to see whether or not my jump procedure does exactly what I want. Now, before I begin this, I really want to point out something that I use in Lynx as I'm building out very, very advanced games. And you may or may not know this, but if you click on the procedures tab button over here, it's this arrow, you'll notice that I have 3 sets of procedure tabs. So my first one, of course, relates back to the first page, and it's all about what's going on here. What's cool about the procedures tab for me is that I can organize where I'm planning things. And for me, when you're starting to build really, really complex procedures and writing it out, you need space to see it. Another thing that you could do if you don't want to have so many tabs is simply press this little arrow button next to a procedure. And you'll see that my procedure has now minimized in the left-hand side, making it a little bit clearer for me to actually see what's going on in my game. I'm just going to expand that now because I'd imagine you guys want to see it. But what I've done here is I decided to make a test jump procedure pane. And you guys can access my game afterwards. There's a couple of comments I've left here about how you can use this and test it yourselves. What I'm going to do is turn to page 2, which is where all of this magic happens. Now, what I would initially do is play over here. This is my test jump. You can see it has the similar commands that Kumiko was just showing you. She wrote it out very quickly for you, but there's another way for you to test it. So right here, if you notice my turtle, I want to practice seeing what's going to happen when that jump happens. So if you saw right there, what happened is my turtle actually drew the jump out that it was going to do. And the reason why I think this is really important is so that you can start to see from a mathematical or, a geographical kind of understanding what's happening when that turtle uses that command. Of course, in our real life game back here, we don't want my lovely dinosaur drawing that line in the game because that will take away from the visual appeal that we're seeing. And that would be quite scary. So this is how you can kind of get around and learn about jumping in a really fun way. What I've done here is I've set up my screen so that I can continuously test on this page just by altering these numbers here. So if you'll notice, if I clear screen, my turtle goes back to its starting position. The pen is erased. There's nothing there. Okay. So just out of curiosity, does anyone want to take their mic off and help me edit my jump procedure? Let's see, you can also write it in the chat and I'll rely on Brenda, Michael, or Peter, or Kumiko to kind of say it to me out loud. So, typically, yep.
There's nothing yet, but one of the things that Jennifer is showing you here is to get to the nice graphics that she has on the previous page, she has to start by getting the structure of the program working properly. And she's putting the pen down for the turtle to draw the line so she can visually see it if it would be going in the right movement and arc of jumping over something.
Yeah, so I'll go into that a little bit more, Michael, because it's exactly what I'm doing. I'm using a pen down feature to basically draw the line as the turtle moves. And you see up here, I've created a procedure that's called setup test turtle. Now, if I right click on my turtle here, you'll notice that it's called test turtle. And this is because this is my turtle that I'm just learning about. And once I have the procedure down and right the way that I want, then I can actually use it and bring it back into my lovely procedures tab right here. Now, of course, when we test things, it's going to mark up the screen, the pen down. So what I've actually added is a clear screen feature. There's 2 commands that I added in there to make this happen. It's picking the pen back up and then using the clear graphics feature so that anything that I've done on my screen disappears, okay? And you'll see here in the comment that I've listed, this is where you're really going to be playing around on this screen. To test your jump, you want to play with these numbers. As Kumiko mentioned, left and right is like the directions of a compass. So we're telling our turtle to change its nose to that direction depending on what number we use, right? Of course, if we say left, it's going to go to the left, which probably in your video screen will look like right. And if we say right, it's going to go the opposite. The second portion of this is talking about telling my turtle to move forward, right? So if we have a degrees that we've attached to it, which is 70 degrees, then it's going to turn and move forward at 70 degrees. So when you do it this way by using the pen down, you actually get to see these numbers work. The other thing that you notice in here is that I've chosen 2 jump features, which means that each jump is probably different from the other. Otherwise, I wouldn't have 2 buttons to use. So when you go back to the procedures tab and scroll downwards, you'll notice that I have labeled my procedures to jump and to big jump. And there's not a lot of major changes that happen here other than you'll see my forward still goes 125, but when I do a little jump, it doesn't go as high up in the sky. And this is why when you are looking at this screen, you want to make sure 2 things. You want to know that your turtle is jumping high enough that it's able to actually get over the barrier that you choose. So in Kumiko's project, that's banana peels, but in mine, it's boulders, which means that my rock might be bigger or smaller depending on what I choose for my game design. The other thing to keep in mind, especially if you're playing with lives like I have done in my game, is that the distance it takes to go over the actual object. Right? So you can imagine how this has a lot of applications with math and other things that you might be interested in. But in order to make your game run perfectly or to run in a way that you enjoy and can jump over objects, you have to make sure the structure works first. So what Kumiko showed you initially is the setup turtle. And so when this turtle goes, essentially, it should be able to jump over the barriers and not interact with them. I can stop, I can reset it into place. What you see happening in mine is a new set lives procedure. Before we get to that, I think it's really important that you understand that in my game, these features are moving at the same time that my main character, the dragon, is moving. So when I start this, I have an automatic procedure that initiates this boulder moving. However, as you see, when the actual dinosaur hits the boulder, my lives are going down quite frequently. So if I don't use my jump command or my jump button, I lose the game, game over, which is kind of how games work. They're going to have different levels of difficulty. So what I really want you to think about now is, what are these different features that you could add to make your game maybe more challenging or more interactive? So just jumping over the bananas is the first level of Kumiko's game, but perhaps the next round she might have some pedestrians walking on the street. Now, of course, we don't want to run into pedestrians because we don't know what's going to happen there. So maybe she's going to want to have her bike jump over the pedestrians. And we know that pedestrians often move, okay, or people on the sidewalk. So how do we make that happen? Now I'm going to show you kind of in the blank slate so that you guys can see. You'll notice that I'm going over to my project design tab, and that's because all of my procedures for the game, again, are on a separate tab, and I don't kind of want to play around with it. I want my own separate notes for this game in particular. So what I want to do essentially is to get these 2 blue turtles, okay, to start moving towards my pink turtle right here. Okay? And there's a few things I have to enter into my game. The first thing that you learn with advanced game design or advanced game decisions is that you can make lists. And lists are a really important feature that you're going to learn about. And it really takes a very simple command called make. So in this game, I really want to set it up to include, you know, 2 boulders that are going to be, or 2 turtles that will be running at me. So I need to create a procedure that's going to allow these 2 turtles to come my way. And just so we can see, right click, blue 1 is there, blue 1 is also there. I'm just going to change that because that seems like an error that will cause problems. Oh no. Blue 1, blue 2. There we go. Beautiful. So I'm going to call it 2 moving barriers. Okay. And I'm going to use the command ask. And then I'm going to move over and write the word barriers. Now you'll notice that that went pink, which is to suggest that it's trying to call to a list called barriers. The thing is, in my project, I haven't made that list yet. So it's not going to be able to make this work quite yet. So for now, I'm just going to write out what I want to happen when the list of barriers, you know, is initiated. Okay, when I'm asking this list of what I'm asking this list of barriers to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is similar to the movement that I gave to my turtle, my pink turtle, or my other character. I want to add a forever command. So I'm going to make sure that my beautiful blue turtles are heading the right direction, because right now, if they were to move, their noses are pointing upwards, north, which means that they're going to move up, which is not exactly what I want it to do. So of course we want to use the set heading procedure, or SETH for short, set H. And a neat trick you can think about as well is using negative intervals. So a lot of people will think of all of the numbers on the compass from 0 all the way to 360. Sometimes I like to do the reverse. If right 90 goes this way, then set heading minus 90 should go the opposite way. So when I type it, I do negative 90, okay? And then I'm going to type forward. And I'm going to introduce something called a random feature. And that's because I don't want my blue turtles to have the ability to just move at one constant pace. I want it to be a surprise to the user as well as myself, so that I can't kind of cheat or beat it very easily. I want it to be, you know, surprising and changing constantly. So when I enter forward, I'm going to use the random. Forward pairs really nicely with random, but the thing is, random also needs a number after it. And that number is actually telling our procedure essentially how far it can move, how far forward it can move up to a certain number. So say I want it to move, let's say 7. I don't want it to be able to go too far ahead. I will add my wait procedure and have, you know, a few seconds or a few moments where it doesn't move. And then it's going to go back a random amount, 5, and before it goes back, I'll do Seth 90. Okay. Now remember, Kumiko said I should have an even amount of square brackets. So what I'm going to do is make sure, if I count this right now, 1, 2, 3, that's not even. So I want to add a 4th on the end there to make sure everything is closed off and working. And I'm going to put end. So now we are going to return for the last few minutes of this to make sure that our barriers actually are listed as a list. In order to do that, I want to make sure that I am making barriers, right? So to think about this, I want to set up my game that has all these things, these elements that I'm going to make sure they work in the game before the game button is pressing start. So to set up test game, the first thing I want to do is make sure this turtle is always going to be in the right position. And if you notice right here, in my code, I already know that when I restart the game, I want my pink turtle to go to a specific position. So I can really just copy this and put it right underneath setup test game. Okay. The next thing I want to do is make sure that my turtles always start in a specific place, my blue turtles that are. So I can move this one around and kind of place it where I want, and I can check the coordinates and use those coordinates. Alternatively, I can leave it like this, and I'll kind of just bring over what I had already. And so you'll see that my blue 1 and blue 2 are set up in position, ready to go. And then what I'm going to do with my setup test game is I'm going to make it so that blue 1 and blue 2 are called barriers. They're combined into a list, and that's where you see this beautiful pink being highlighted right above. So to do that, you want to use the command make, and you'll see that it went green right away. Now to make barriers, I'm going to use the double quotation, and I'm going to make sure that I'm spelling the word barriers the way that I wrote it above. B-A-R-R-I-E-R-S. Okay. And the next thing I'm going to do is that in order to make a list that contains blue 1 and blue 2, I actually have to tell make barriers what turtles I want to be included in barriers. So I'm going to use my square bracket again, and I'm going to simply write blue 1 space, and then you're going to write blue 2, close bracket. And we call it blue 1 and blue 2 because those are the names of our turtles that we're using, right? After that, you want to press end, or you want to type end, not press end, sorry. So when we do this, the next thing that's really important is to make sure that we have this setup test game listed in our begin game procedure. You can see here that move pink happens, right? And that's kind of great. That gets our beautiful pink turtle to go. So if I press go, it's just the pink turtle moving. Okay. But the next thing I want to do is make sure that these blue turtles are also moving at the same time. In order to do that, I want to make sure that I place my setup test game above move pink. Now, you can probably guess that I'm missing one thing here, one lovely thing, and that happens to be my moving barriers procedure. When I press the start button or the go button, my barriers went back to normal, but they're not moving quite yet, and they're kind of above my turtle, which is already telling me that my turtle was not placed in the right spot. It means I have to find out my show position again, right? You'll see that by moving my turtle there, I typed the command. And now what I'm going to do is make sure that that's listed in the pink. Okay. And that also, when I go to my restart, I change those numbers to reflect it as well, because I made a change to where the pink turtle will begin. If I don't change the other procedures that also include this, it will be a little bit more complicated, and that's not what we want. So next, I want to make sure that I'm adding this name, moving barriers, right below my move pink. And now the test button that we so dread sometimes because we're worried it won't work, we're going to try and see if this happens. And ta-da! Now you have moving barriers coming at you. So I'm going to stop there for now because I think it's really important that you start to see how much creativity you can have with this. Moving barriers was just one idea that I thought about in my game that would make it more challenging. When we get back to the initial game design, you can see that I've added a lives feature, and that takes a little bit more coding with our procedures, but that's just one way that you could go. There are many other things that you can do with the OnTouch command that make it happen so that firstly, that these lives can disappear, perhaps that maybe you want to have a timer. Maybe you want people to only be able to see how far they can get in the game and how much time they can, last in the game. So I'll stop there, and I'm going to allow my screen to stop being shared, and I'll invite Peter to come back. And for any kids that have questions right now or kind of want to figure out how certain things worked, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Okay, Jennifer, that was wonderful. Thank you, Kumiko. I think it was a great intro to show how all the students present today can make a basic video game with interactivity and a life counter, etc. As you said, we'd get to that in a second session. But you know, you could do your basic Super Mario type games with this quite easily, and you become the creator of the game and not just the player of the game. So once again, I'd like to thank Jennifer and Kumiko of Hackergal